All right, folks, welcome in. I'm Jake Ellenbogen, and today we are going to be talking about the Rams and 49ers game. I'm going to give you my thoughts. We've been doing this, my notes, and I'm going to keep doing it. So before we get into it, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment. Also, be sure to follow me on all social media at JKBogan, including Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Kick, and Twitch. And in addition to that, just want to let you guys know that today's sponsor is Sleeper, as always, and you guys can go and check out Sleeper and have a chance to 100x your cash on daily fantasy football using my code JKB. It's going to get you a $100 match up to your first $100 on your first deposit. So also, Sleeper for a limited time has a $20 free entry that you have to get in on the action with. So you don't even need to deposit to get the $20 entry, but definitely be sure to get in the action with Sleeper. The link is in the description below. All right, so I have to start off by saying this. The Rams are really struggling to start games aside from the Eagles game. Obviously, the Eagles game, they get off to a great start. You know, they go in the second half, they're up big. Yes, aside from that, they have gotten off to a bad start in the 49ers game, the Texans game, the Colts game, and the Titans game. They actually, until this game, had all their wins against teams where in those games, they started off losing going into the second half. The Rams are tied for 20th in the league with 4 points per game in the first quarter. Second quarter, the Rams are tied for 15th at 7.2 points per game in the second quarter. The third quarter is where the Rams tend to be, among the best in the league. They're third in the league, averaging 6.2 points per game. And in the fourth quarter, the Rams have scored 7.2 points per game, which is good for 15th in the league. So if you break that up into halves, the Rams averaged the 19th best offense in the first half while scoring 11.2 points per game. And in the second half, the Rams are 7th in the league, scoring 13.4 points per game. They're also 21st in red zone offense. In my mind, all of this, aside from the red zone offense, stems from a few things. The first half, the Rams choose most often than not to defer. They have been winning the toss, and they've been deferring to get the ball in the second half. So while that definitely has its perks, because, of course, you never know how a game is going to go down, getting the ball at the end of the half, you might not be able to start the game as fast as you want to. And because of that, now you're anticipating on what the other team's going to do. You don't get that boost the other team does. And so therefore, really you're expected to score more in the second half because that's when you get the ball to start. And you can really kind of dominate that third quarter. Whereas in the first quarter, if you don't get the ball in the first quarter, to start the game, a team like the Eagles could just hold on to the football, have a 17-play drive and take up most of the half. So there you go. Another thing, speaking of that, the Rams are 24th in time of possession in the first half, and I do believe that coincides with deferring until the second half, but they're also letting teams sustain those long drives and those early game scripts, and they don't appear to be working that well in terms of their game scripts. I believe the Rams, 22nd in the league, in the second half time of possession, which isn't great. I still believe they're a better second half team by a mile. And the reason is because their over-reliance in the passing game and really not willing to run the football, on top of the fact that they generate a ton of explosives, I think that 22nd in the league is very misleading. I think they have been a very potent offense in the second half of games. So I think in conclusion to that, the Rams are one of the best teams at making second half adjustments. But until they put together a consistent 60 minutes of football, they are going to find themselves in closer games than they should be based on the talent that is on this team. And I do imagine after the bye, this gets fixed. So with that being said, I think that has a lot to do with why, aside from the Titans game, every game has come down to the wire and has been close. Now, let's get into the rest of the game. Starting with the quarterback, Matthew Stafford, he was fantastic. He had some very key throws in this game against the 49ers. He doesn't have the best pass protection, but that's not stopping him. In my opinion, he's having an MVP level season in the Eagles game, which was his worst game of the year. Aside from that, he hasn't looked better. 375 yards last year and 3 touchdowns last week, and then 389 this week and 3 touchdowns. He's keeping care of the football. He's been awesome. He had a missed throw on that first drive where he overthrows Tutu Atwell. Probably thought it was Devontae Adams at first. Throws way over his head. And then he had the missed deep ball to Puka Nacua, which those are kind of hit or miss anyway, and he had good coverage anyway. And then the missed throw on 3rd and 6 right before the final play to Kyren Williams, in which he caught it, but it was behind him because the pressure wasn't able, he wasn't able to put that out in stride and was kind of throwing off his back foot. But Matthew Stafford in this game, man, especially in person, he looked fantastic. On top of that, Kyren Williams played really well, especially in the receiving game, despite the fumble. I also think this was his best game as a receiving back, showing you what he can do. 8 catches for 66 yards, 2 touchdowns, really bailed out a lackluster red zone offense that went 3 for 5 in the red zone. Something has to change there. I think the fumble, while absolutely inexcusable, I'm not making excuses whatsoever, even though he was punched in the head. It was just simply a mistake. As you can see, Kyren has both hands on the football, covering up. Then he sees daylight, and instead of just living to play another down, which he absolutely could have done, he tries to punch it in, knowing that even though he had 2 to 3 downs more, he still just tried to punch it in there, got a little careless, got a little trigger happy, and unfortunately, you end up seeing his other hand come off the football, and while he's trying to accelerate, that's when Alfred Collins punches the ball out, which, of course, he did get punched in the head. It snapped his neck a little bit, and Kyren did go down limp. And honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if he's in some sort of concussion protocol during this mini bye week. But for the record, I thought that absolutely was inexcusable. He shouldn't have done that. I get where he's going. I'm sure he knows he shouldn't have done that. He had 2 hands on the football, then he took it off. He's been really good about covering lately, and that was just really bad. So not great there. Blake Corum, on the other hand, had a nice run, but aside from that, total liability. Drop passes yet again, dropping a toss play that gives the 49ers an unforced error and an unforced takeaway. Matthew Stafford now gets charged with that fumble, but it was all Blake Corum. And that point, you're fumbling down 14-0. You're at the 24. You're almost in the red zone. To me, that's what led the 49ers game feeling like it was more dominant on their side than it really was. The Rams score on that drive, and it would be 14-7. And then the Rams, of course, getting a stop on the next drive and then scoring a touchdown would have been a tie game right then and there. So I know people want to excuse Corum because he's young and he doesn't have a fumbling problem. But the problem is, if you were going to take carries away from your best pass protector at running back, your best runner of the football, and your best receiver at running back, there has to be a justification. And we know Blake Corum isn't better than Kyren Williams at anything to justify keeping him off the field, and when he can't catch the football and he can't hold on to the football. So Kyren Williams, again, was punched and the ball came out. And that is inexcusable, unacceptable. But Blake Corum just dropped the ball, which is an unforced error. It gave away a free possession. They're both incredibly frustrating, but one happens and the other, never happens. You can't give up free possessions in this league. You just don't normally see guys drop toss plays, in the running game. But, it's going to be hard to win games that way. He's not great in pass protection either, and neither is Jarquez Hunter. So while I'd love to see Jarquez Hunter, there's a lot of people that are pushing for Blake Corum to start or Jarquez Hunter to start. Neither can expect to, step up in pass pro the way Kyren is. And right now, this pass protection leaves a lot to be desired, where I don't think you can get away with that. Now moving on to the receiving room, I love the diversification in the receiving room. They got Whittington involved. They got Tutu Atwell involved, obviously. They got Devontae Adams, Puka Nacua. What was bizarre for me is that I felt like even though he caught 10 passes, Puka Nacua wasn't utilized nearly enough. Devontae Adams looked great. The miscommunication on that final drive with Devontae Adams was frustrating, but he looked great overall. Tutu Atwell and Matthew Stafford seem to be building a rapport, especially on that throw. I mean, Stafford does a 360 throw, one of the best throws I've ever seen, probably the best throw I've ever seen in person. And Atwell just catching that was insane. You really felt at that point, wow, they can actually do this. They can win in overtime. But then, he tries to go to Atwell and, he had the throw, maybe if he puts a little bit more touch behind it, but he had the throw, and Diamador Lenore, give him credit, made a nice play on the football, tipped it away, and, Atwell unfortunately wasn't able to get that fade in the end zone. So, I don't think this passing attack is a well-oiled machine yet. I think they show you how good they can be and how dominant they were and how efficient they were, despite only having the ball for 14 minutes less than the 49ers, around a 26-minute clip to the 40-minute clip that the Niners had. So fewer possession than the Niners, 14 fewer minutes. And I thought this offense really did a nice job moving the football, and they had 2 turnovers near the red zone that really kind of hid how just dominant this offense truly was. And speaking of which, they were dominant without Tyler Higbee, who was out. So Colby Parkinson got the start, and he's okay. It's nothing special. I'm not going to beat him up on the red zone target, but that does need to go to Terrence Ferguson, in my opinion. Speaking of the rookie Terrence Ferguson, he had 1 target, made his, presence known on that target. First career catch, 20-plus yarder, wrestled the ball out of defender's hands. Really good, big play, playing through contact. Just one of those things that this is why they got Terrence Ferguson. However, we didn't see him the rest of the night, so I think that was a mistake there. But the entire tight end room needs to play every week. They need to play Terrence Ferguson more. They absolutely need to use him more like Gerald Everett back in the day, but also deploy him in the red zone, because this red zone offense just simply is not good enough right now. And Terrence Ferguson could 100% provide a spark that would turn them into a very scary red zone offense. I thought Davis Allen made a couple really nice plays. Still, I don't believe he's an absolute game breaker at tight end like I'd like, but I think he can hold back, and actually hold his own there. And then you have, Colby Parkinson. He had some opportunities, and, he's really just a guy that can block well and, catch like an occasional 20-yard pass or a touchdown or what have you. But, neither have the game-breaking speed. I see Davis Allen, like his ceiling is like a Dalton Schultz, like a good player that can move the chains, but he's never going to be a top tight end, whereas Terrence Ferguson could be one of the top pass-catching tight ends in the National Football League if he ever hits that ceiling. The offensive line, as I mentioned, leaves a lot to be desired. This is the worst performance of the year in the ground game. They were not able to run the football against this 49ers front that teams have had no issue running the ball against. The offensive line, I thought, going into this game, they were going to be able to do that. But they did have their moments. I thought, as the game went on, Warren McClendon Jr. looked better. He looked more comfortable making his first start of the season for the injured Rob Havenstein. I thought Kevin Dotson probably had his best game of the season. Justin Diedish looked better in pass pro than he has. Still very much ready for Avila to come back. And Alec Jackson struggled probably more than he has all year. But despite all of that, I thought Stafford did, somehow carve out enough time in the pocket. I just can't wait for Avila to be back. And I'm hoping Rob Havenstein, who's been playing banged up, I believe, he got this day off, so to speak, this week off. I'm hoping Havenstein can come back healthy, because they are going to need Havenstein when he comes back to be Rob Havenstein. And that's just the reality of it. But looking at the defense, right? The defense, oddly enough, as great as this defense is, I thought this game was absolutely the worst defensive performance they have had since the Bills game. They only gave up 26 points, okay? But I still thought this was the worst defensive performance they've had since the Buffalo Bills game. The Rams, really just inexcusable. The pass rush didn't really get going. They had fewer than 20 pressures with all that talent there. They had 1 sack for whatever reason. They just were not getting through. And then Chris Shula's blitzing just isn't getting home the way you need it to. It got home in the first half of the Philadelphia Eagles game. It really hasn't the last, you could argue 2.5 games because the second half of the Eagles game, it wasn't getting through. The Colts game, it wasn't getting through, and it didn't get through really in the 49er game. The linebackers were definitely picked on, kind of unfair, just the way the game plan was, which, by the way, I absolutely disagreed with. Truly hated it. I thought Nate Landman, he gave up a bunch of yards on a bunch of targets, but thought he played really well, all things considered. Had some key pass breakups. He's looked good playing the run. Had tons of tackles, 14 in this one. I thought the Rams, once again, showed you how dominant their run defense is. I don't know how much it was the Rams defense and more so how bad Christian McCaffrey is as a running back right now. He's really just a receiving back at this point, but really dominated against him, did a nice job against Jonathan Taylor, dominated Saquon Barkley. So the Rams run defense, ironically, which is the biggest concern for a lot of people in the offseason, they are absolutely dominant right now. But the cornerback room is a disaster, okay? Never in my life have I seen a player who has, in my opinion, earned more money and looked more valuable by not being out there than Ahkello Witherspoon. It's so bad right now. Nobody respects his cornerback room. Kobe Durant is good. Darius Williams is capable. And Forbes has his moments, but these guys are not great. And Kendrick Bourne just had a career-high game looking like Jerry freaking Rice. And this Rams cornerback room could not do anything against him. And now I still think they are better than what they looked like. Against the 49ers, I thought this was just a bad game. I also thought, again, the game plan was terrible, playing predominantly cover 2, it felt like, against Mac Jones, just really inexcusable, treating Mac Jones like he's some Josh Allen. Ironically, the last time you saw Josh Allen was the worst this defense has looked. But aside from that, I still just don't think they played well. They played way too off guys, and then just didn't tackle, and it was just really frustrating all around. The good news is they get to play against Cooper Rush. And if he starts dicing up this secondary, the Rams officially need to go out and trade for somebody. They already kind of have to. It's just, there's really no excuse. You're not going to have Ahkello Witherspoon back for quite a while. So you're going to have to figure this thing out. Kello, after he took over for Kobe Durant, after the Bills game, this defense took it to another level. It's very clear to see that this team is missing Ahkello Witherspoon, and the defense can get through and look really good when the front is playing the way it is. But we're finally starting to see. I mean, I already knew this, and I knew a lot of people out there already knew this. But if you didn't know this, Ahkello Witherspoon is incredibly valuable to this defense, and the Rams would be silly not to bring him back after this season. So I thought it was interesting when McVay was asked about the cornerback room. He basically said something to the effect of, yeah, even though this is the same guy he believed they had 4 starting corners, they could look outside and go after somebody and, bring somebody in. And so I found that really interesting. They brought in Trey Brown. He was supposed to be a special team, physical guy, a little too physical, gave up a special teams penalty that was awful in this 49er game. Just absolutely terrible. You can't do that. Really eliminated a nice return by Xavier Smith late in the game. But they have 2 corners in-house in practice squad, AJ Green and Cameron Lampkin. I think it's time to call AJ Green up to the 53. He had a great offseason. He had a great training camp. He had a great joint practice. And now, you talk about the preseason he had. It was fantastic. He's built to play on the outside. There's really a no-brainer decision, in my opinion. Just call him up. But as far as who they could go after, it's only week 5, but the Bengals did just bench Cam Taylor-Britt due to poor play in 5 plays against the Broncos. He's been dealing with an injury, but I think he's a great option. He's got great experience on the outside. And the game against Jacksonville just 2 weeks ago, you could probably get him for a 5th. He was really good against Jacksonville. So I would say this, trade targets, Cam Taylor-Britt of the Bengals. The Browns, they have 2 guys, Denzel Ward, which is unlikely, but I would say more likely than J.C. Horn of the Panthers. Greg Newsome, the second on the Browns, expiring deal. Dolphins cornerback Rasul Douglas. Giants cornerback Cordell Flott. Panthers cornerback, again, J.C. Horn. I think it's very unlikely. That contract just doesn't make any sense to trade away right now. Panthers cornerback Mike Jackson. I really like this. Really good zone fit. A 47.3 targeted passer rating. Then you have Raiders cornerback Eric Stokes, another scheme fit in the zone. 62.3 targeted passer rating. I think those guys are sleepers, as you could argue the best options for the Rams for a bargain. Also Ravens cornerback, because we don't know how the Ravens season's going to go. Ravens cornerback Chidobe Awuzie. I think, he'd be a great fit. The Rams almost signed him this offseason. It was between the Rams and Ravens. He chose the Ravens. The Saints cornerback, Alontae Taylor. The Saints are going to be looking to trade players. Seahawks cornerback, Reek Woolen. I'd be out on him. Not trying to give the Seahawks any more picks, but Reek Woolen could be an option. And then the Titans cornerback, Jalen Armour Davis, who can play. All these guys can play on the outside. I think they're all options. Free agency targets could include a Michael Davis, Kendall Fuller due to the familiarity with Chris Shula and Sean McVay, and Aubrey Pleasant being with Washington, and then Stephon Gilmore. But kind of moving away from that a little bit here, the special teams unit should have had a fumble, if not for a terribly early whistle by Bill Vinovich's awful officiating crew. They were terrible. Sean Dolak forced the fumble. Isaac Guerrero was still moving his legs, and they called forward progress. and that his progress was stopped, which is just a terrible call because it's an early whistle, which I would say is very sketchy. It cost the Rams 6 points and a huge momentum swing in a game that they really needed. The kicking unit is still an issue. There are people blaming Josh Carty for not kicking quick enough. I think that's a cop-out. Let's just call a spade a spade. To me, this kicking unit is getting abused. Now even Sean McVay has come out and said they have cost him 2 games. So what's next for the Rams? They're 3-2, better than last year and the year prior, and yet there's so much panic in the fan base right now. And on top of that, this is a Sean McVay team. Every single year, it feels like lately, they are a second half of the season team. So they're more talented than ever, in my opinion. They're dealing with 2 key injuries at cornerback and left guard. They have 2 more games before the bye, one against a Lamar Jackson-less Ravens team, and the other's a London trip to face the Jaguars. They have a bye after that, and in my opinion, that's going to be so key and critical for this team to figure things out. So I'll just say this. Once again, I believe this team is going to win the Super Bowl. I am not panicking like everyone else. I'm not going to do it. This team is going to win the Super Bowl, of course, health permitting. I love the roster. The coaching staff's great. I do believe they have concerns, but they're not major. They will be fixed, and I expect the second half standouts to be guys like Terrence Ferguson, Jarquez Hunter, 2 rookies. I think Josiah Stewart is going to take his play to the next level. He's already kind of teased that. There's going to be some huge roles down the stretch. I think Tutu Atwell and Jordan Whittington are going to be a big part of this. So I do believe they're going to get active at the trade deadline, as reports are starting to put out there. I do think they go after a corner, but do they go after a guard? Do they go after a center? Do they go after a tackle? To me, they're going to get, maybe they could go after another weapon. Who knows? But they're going to go after somebody at the deadline. I don't think it's crazy to say that the Rams believe in this team, that they can and they should win the Super Bowl. I am not counting this team out after a fluke short week loss that happened in overtime where everything in the kitchen sink had to go against the Rams, and yet they still almost found a way to win. But the bottom line and the ultimate takeaway from this game is that the Rams offense was actually very good, gave the ball away on 2 fumbles, and then the defense played the worst game since the Buffalo Bills game last year. What do those games have in common? Again, it's Kello Witherspoon, who makes everybody around him better. I don't care what anyone says. I think the Niners are good. I do. Definitely impressed me. But at the same time, they're not better than the Rams, okay? The Rams defense didn't show up. The Rams offense did. They barely possessed the football. They were incredibly efficient, averaging over 7 yards per play to the 49ers, 4.9. And I am in no way worried about this team, and I don't believe you should be either. So let me know in the comments section below what you guys think. A little bit longer, and I apologize, but there were a lot of notes I wanted to get through. I finally recorded this. Hopefully you guys enjoy. Hopefully the voice, which is kind of dead from being at SoFi, hopefully the voice comes back, but also it doesn't distract you enough. Appreciate you guys watching all the way through. If you did, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, comment if you haven't already, and check out today's sponsor, Sleeper. Again, free $20 entry, no deposit needed. Go get in on the action. Use my code JKB. Sign up today. Link is in the description below. Let's get ready for Baltimore. Later, folks.